Welcome to the Mellow!
So, I'm going to play you now the theme of the possible themes that I've made for the podcast.
Okay.
So, I've made two. There's loads of instrumentals that we could use, as you know. There's ones that you're quite fond of. The one that you're quite fond of is this one. So yeah, you're pretty fond on that one, right? And I thought without lyrics, it doesn't have. It would definitely get used, but it doesn't say what we're about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went for I tried to do another one. This is the first one I did. And then it's gonna fade in and be like, "Welcome to the show." Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Any thoughts?
I think I need to listen to it again, but I don't know.
I wasn't convinced when I
Yeah.
made it. I have to admit. I thought it was okay.
I don't know if it really fits.
No, I didn't think it
Yeah.
fit. I thought it was just something that I liked, that I had made,
Yeah.
that I had had an excuse to make. So then that's why I decided to make another one.
The method, we're eating or sleeping or fight. The method, for marriage or divorce or one night. Well, I know you probably think that it sounds pretty dumb, but the methods you use to get shit done. If you're chatting up a lover, you're going on a run, then it might be wise to heed the words of a pro with a little bit of help. Who knows, to get some happiness out of your woes, to get promoted, CEO of a happy mind inside your head. You don't want to wake up dead, thinking why you work so hard for things that hardly work for you. The method works.
That I like.
Yeah.
It's just. I don't even know what to say about it. It just works. It's funny. And it kind of explains what it's about, and it's just you all over. It's just like,
Yeah, but it's got to be about us
obviously
both, but yeah.
Well, no, of course, but it's like
So yeah, that's how I thought.
I'm happy with that.
You happy with that?
Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm glad. Okay. Sweet.
That's really fun.
So there is one thing that I want to talk about,
Yes.
which is I don't want this podcast to ever be political. Personally, I want to stay politically ambiguous, but at the moment there's there's a lot going on in terms of politics and in terms of social movements and the Black Lives Matter march, which happened 2 days ago, and yesterday, which was the biggest civil rights movement in the world ever.
So it was like, is that in terms of it was the biggest collective?
Yeah,
movement?
so 18 countries had protests, and all 42 states?
50 states.
50 states.
Yeah.
There you
And
go.
protests.
Had protests. And obviously in the UK, there was one in Manchester, Chester, Bristol, Cardiff, London, just to name the ones that I know of.
There was even one in Rill, which is near
Exactly,
my
so-
hometown, which is like the smallest.
So, potentially hundreds of millions of people
Yeah.
may have taken to the streets to protest this. So it's a pretty big deal, and it raises a lot of concerns, because obviously some people are concerned that now's not the right time and that this is going to cause a spike in COVID-19 cases, which is a fair comment, but I think also is a fair comment that a lot of those people don't really care whether there's going to be they don't care so much when people are going out and doing stuff like going to the beach and I know there's probably way more people in way closer proximity at this, but they kind of use this as a scapegoat to attack the other side, which is never good, because you'll never want to be finding ammo in something like this. But there are comments from people who work in the NHS who, every day they're going to be dealing with people who are dying and struggling with so much, and then they're going to turn on their news and they're going to see crowds of thousands and thousands of people standing shoulder to shoulder, and they're just going to be like, well, what am I going to do? Go to work tomorrow and have to deal with this. So it raises a big issue. But the one thing I wanted to talk about, other than those issues which are very difficult to define what's right and wrong, is it started when I was thinking about the statue. So they brought down this statue in Bristol that was put up in the late 1800s. Been up, fairly long time, it feels like. And there was a petition to take it down, and that was ignored. And some people are up in arms because, it's damaging public property. Fair enough, it's not really right to condone that sort of behaviour. Like, where does it end? Obviously, I think most people can agree that the statue of a slave trader is not something that belongs in our society these days. My thoughts on it is that one of the issues that we have is that we don't have a big enough scope of time, that we feel like a statue that was put up in the 1880s, I think it's 1885 it was put up, is important because it's been up from 1885 to 2020. But that is such an outrageously short amount of time in the world that we live in. And, if some scientists predict that, I think I've told this before, that the human race could potentially live for 1 billion years, potentially. And that means if there was a 20-yard piece of rope, we wouldn't have even made it on the first quarter-inch mark on that, piece of rope. There's so much longer to go. And that's the whole human race. That's the whole 400,000 years that we've been around. We're going to take just, 200 or so years less and say that statue is important. We need to look at the bigger picture and be like, no, it isn't important. Take it down. The government needs to be like, well, it's not a big deal. Take it down. Other stuff stays up. Doesn't matter. It should never have even been an issue. As soon as it was raised, look at it. Yeah, it's a piece of shit. Take it down. And until we can view these real world problems as a bigger thing, they seem so important, yet they're so outrageously arbitrary, and it perplexes me. So it first came to my attention when I was talking about universal basic income with my parents, and I was like, we're going to live potentially for 1 billion years. Do you think in 1 million years we're going to be concerning ourselves with the even distribution of food? You know what I mean? And wealth.
Yeah.
Just no way. Human race in 1 million years. Look how far we've come in 400,000 years. We've gone from, shitting on the floor, drawing, on the walls of caves with, ground up bugs and all that, to agriculture, to living in a society where we have Wi-Fi and podcasts and readily available home recording systems and, all sorts of ridiculous things. We have such incredible ability for abstract thought. In 1 million years from now, which is not that far along the rope of 1 billion years, we're not even going to concern ourselves with how can we evenly distribute food and wealth so that everybody can live a basic life without having to worry about a 2-week period where they're not going to get money or something like that. And until we can open this scope up, these problems like statues in squares, whether they should or shouldn't be put up, feels so stupid because no one gives a shit in 1 million years. No, we need to think beyond our generation and think, what do we want to see the world? This is how I feel. So I don't want to be prescriptive on this, but you know, we need to, or I think we need to view what we actually want the world to be like, not what we think should be important right now, but what we think in a million years they're going to be like, looking back on this and be like, it was so stupid. They had a scare of a global pandemic, and the biggest problem was people didn't have enough money to buy food. You know, like, they'd be like, well, you know, we just gave people the food because we know how to, we've done agriculture for a million years, 400,000 years, you know. We know how to do agriculture. It's a piece of piss, and there's enough food to go around. We just had to think about everybody at once. I don't know if that's wishful thinking.
I think
that's how
I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree, but I think it's very hard to be in the mindset of in a million years it's not going to matter, because I think right now we still have to go through the process of it mattering in order for it not to matter. If that makes sense. We can't all just be here and be like, oh yeah, but like in 1,000 years we're not going to care about this, so like we should just forget about it now. Because 1,000 years ago, like looking back at that now, we're like, oh yeah, all of this is so stupid, and like, oh, this is, you know, looking back on things that have happened in the past and that's how we look at it. That now, as you are saying, we will look at the present moment in a million years. But in order for us to get to the other moment in a million years, I think we still have to go through the process of things that we think don't matter still mattering, and then realising that they don't matter, and then that's when you move on.
Yeah, I guess it's not a case of me thinking they don't matter. I think it first came up when we were talking about universal basic income and people being like, oh, but you know, how's it going to work? And you're like, it has to work. Think about the future. This is the first step towards us wasting so much energy on how we achieve money and how we achieve food. You know, don't be a case of how is this going to work now. Be a case of course we have to move to this point. Like, it's like when people fight back on the racial injustice, and you're just like, look, I understand that right now it feels like a big step, but in 1,000 years we will have moved past this, and there's no point fighting it. You just have to do it. Like, it's pointless to even think that you can gain another 10, 15, 20 years of this structure. And that's how I feel. Anyway, I do know what you mean.
Yeah, I get what you mean, but
it's like a time scope that people just think about their own life.
I think in order to get to the point where these things are important, I think we have to. I think what people are doing is the right thing now. I think it's hard to say.
I'm more against people who deny it.
I think it's hard to say that in 1,000 years you're not going to care, but in order to get there, we have to go through the process of these things that you think that people might think are stupid, like that statue being up and stuff. That in order for that statue to come down, something has to happen for it to come down, and something.
Who didn't take it down after they read that petition? What did they think? You think that petition is going to go away?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They were going to forget about it. They were going to become less compassionate and less critical of the past. And, you know, no, we're not. We're only going to become more compassionate and more critical. And that's been a trend. And of course it's going to be a trend throughout life, because otherwise we're not going to survive.
No.
There's no way we're going to survive on this planet altogether if we don't become more compassionate. That just is the case. It might suck a bit for the people who are benefiting, and that's fair enough, and they may want to resist, and that's also fair enough, because everyone has their own interests. That's not a bad thing. But if those people could understand that it has to move forwards, then they would, if their whole philosophy was based on a wider time scope, then maybe they wouldn't even think the same way. They would just be like, I understand, I'm part of a bigger picture, rather than being the main part of their own picture.
So what you're saying is in order to move forward, they should look at it in a way that is just looking at the bigger picture rather than... But I don't know.
But they don't have to support the issues necessarily. They just have to support the whole idea of the world moving forward, and that their part in it may not be the one that they want, you know, and that is their own struggle, and they get to own that struggle in a way, which is I get to own to be the person who didn't necessarily want this, but I do understand the bigger picture is, you know, and it's maybe a tough pill to swallow, and it's a whole ideological change, I think, which is to view the world like this, to view the world, you know, as this huge thing that's going to go on forever. I think a lot of people feel like it's just going to not go on that long, and we might as well live it out. If they see themselves as part of one huge existence that's going to go on for 1 billion years, and maybe they've got to make a decision that doesn't jive with them, but it will increase the quality of millions of lives for millions of years.
I think it maybe comes down a little bit to like unintended selfishness.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there's a whole big thing, you know, living in the moment, living in the present, not worrying about the past or the future. So to a lot of people, it's going to be like, well, I'm going to think about me right now. I'm not going to think about my life. And that's what they're going to be focusing on, rather than like, oh, I'm gonna make decisions based on generations to come, as opposed to just like I'm gonna make decisions on enjoying my own life to the best that I can.
Yeah.
So, but going back to what you were saying about people's concept of time, I do think it is way off. I was talking with someone the other day, and we were talking about obviously everything that's going on, and I think I read that there weren't any black people in football until the 70s. There were no black people in rugby until the 90s, and like to a lot of people that seems like, oh, it was so long ago, but it wasn't. Like it's less than a lifetime ago. It's literally like round the corner. Well, round the corner behind us. It's really not long ago, but it seems like it was ages ago.
Yeah, and now, and I guess the sort of like thing you're not saying is now that's part and parcel of those sports.
Yeah,
is
exactly.
The best athletes in both of those sports often come from countries of colour.
Exactly.
Or come from people of colour in countries that they've migrated to, and you know, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy how small a window that we give ourselves, and I think I guess I just think it's a philosophy. I think it's a philosophical problem. It's not an individual problem. It's a whole thing. Even the people who are protesting, they have the right idea, but I don't think I don't want to generalize. I don't mean to generalize when I say these things, but I think that a lot of people protesting aren't thinking like this. They are thinking in the moment, but they're just good people. But if we were all to change our whole, you know, we're all to actively change the way that we view the world as this much, you know, we learn history we do learn history. We would teach history in a different way, that we'd learn this whole thing, but we'd also teach it as us in the middle of a very large picture, rather than us at the very front with this horrible trail of like crime that follows us.
Yeah.
That we're like at the front of, and we're just continuing to mash through the future, creating more and more crime. Or we see ourselves, because this is the only way I feel that we could do, as on a long journey towards bliss, towards harmony, which is where we're gonna get. Look at where we are now. In the last 20 years, I mean, I'm 25, you're 25?
24.
Look how much has changed in the last 10 years in terms of views on meditation, on yoga, on self-love, self-care, on caring about others. Obviously those things have always been there, but now they're like a massive zeitgeist. Like my mum's into it, my dad's into it, vegetarianism, veganism, you know, the Me Too movement. It's just constant reevaluation. I think that in the future they'll look back at this time as being like one of the Enlightenments.
Yeah, like a transformational period.
Yeah, there was the Enlightenment when we realised, religion is not as important or as all-encompassing as we first thought, and science took over, and then medicine became a big thing and we saved lives. You know, maybe there's arguments to be had for other parts of history between then and now that could be called another enlightenment. But now we're going on to enlightenment, which is, oh, guess what? People don't want to be fucked over all the time, by men, by white people, by
Rich
other
people.
women, by rich people, exactly. And then once we get over this in 50, 100 years of these reevaluation, we're going to be, we're maybe some of the nicer people, and obviously there's lots of nice people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
This may be the baseline. And then if we were alive then, we'd be so much infinitely nicer than we are now. If we were born 100 years ago, we might be like still kind of nice compared to everyone else, but a lot worse than we are now. We'll probably go down the pub, lift up a girl's skirt, maybe steal a few pennies out of someone's hat, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Be nicer than the people who like getting brawls all the time. It's all relative.
I think the concept of time is a difficult thing to get around, and it's something that you would need to spend quite a lot of time thinking about to come up with with your own thoughts about how you want to sort of deal with it. And I use the sort of system myself in that I think about, I don't know, with in a particular situation, I'll be like, right, in an hour it's going to be done anyway, and I'm not going to care about it. Just for an example. So it's a similar thing in that oh, well, in 50 years, the world's going to be in a much different position anyway, so I'm not going to, you're not going to have to worry about these things in 50 years. But that doesn't take away from the fact that right now you do have to worry about it, or you do have to act on it.
I don't say people shouldn't worry about it because of that.
No, but I mean, I think it's hard for people to get into the mindset of being
yeah.
I don't know, of being I don't need to care about this because in 1,000 years I'm not going to care about it. Does that make sense?
I guess what I mean is, yeah, it does make sense. What I mean is the people who are doing good, if they had this mindset, they would understand that they're trailblazers on a path towards something great.
Yeah.
That would help them be less angry at the people who are bad. The people who are bad would understand that they just don't quite get it yet, but they are themselves on a path towards greatness with everybody else. So they don't need to, might not feel the need to resist quite as much. They know that there's nothing to hold on to. They just need to understand themselves and
play their part essentially.
Exactly, and they have the option then to be part of it, but not to be instigators of it, because not everybody wants to be an instigator of bringing down statues. But maybe they can feel that they're part of a bigger picture, and although this doesn't jive with them now, it's still part of a journey that we're all on together, rather than we're, one group of people is on this journey to get violently towards, equal rights, and one person is digging their heels in as much as possible because they don't want to go. But yeah.
I think it comes down to a lot of different personality traits as well, because
it's so much.
Some people just they care, but they don't feel like they can do anything, or they don't feel like they should do anything, or there are people that are very sporadic and maybe, I don't know, you probably can't care too much in a situation like this, but obviously the person who pulled down that statue definitely cares a lot. Probably the complete opposite of someone who cares but doesn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
But it's hard to, I don't think there's ever going to be a time where you're going to get 100% of people who care about something all acting in the same way, in a positive way.
I think in the future we'll have better, I just feel like in a million years we'll be able to communicate so much faster and more efficiently. It'll be so beyond comprehension right now. Thoughts will just travel through the whole race instantly, and we'll be able to define these differences together quickly, and AI will do a lot of this work for us, where it will compare thoughts and give them to you in such it'd just be a completely different world where communication is instant and understanding is instant, and we don't have to have these ridiculous breakdowns of dialogue which cause so much problem. And I was listening earlier, and Boris Johnson, someone was asking whether Boris Johnson had any black people in his cabinet, and the answer is he doesn't have any black people in his cabinet. He has a reasonably diverse cabinet in terms of different parts of the world, but in terms of, black people, he doesn't have any. And I don't necessarily think that he would consider himself racist. And he went to Eton, and I went to a private school. I did nothing like Eton, although I played football at Eton, and we're against them. And they were horrible, horrible people. They would steal your stuff if you left it in the changing rooms. They were really rude. They were really rough on the pitch. It was always a pain in the ass to play. But anyway, so I played there, but I went to a school that was, an art school. It was fairly posh. And there was a few black people, and there was no racism. We were all friends. There was no need for it. So if you grew up in that environment and you continue to be in that environment, you wouldn't even worry about racism because it just doesn't exist, because they're rich, wealthy black people who are just associating with young, unknowing, rich, carefree Welsh white people. And I guess the factor is we're all wealthy and carefree. We don't have to worry about those things. So he might not consider himself that because he doesn't even know, because there's so much of a breakdown of dialogue that he doesn't know what it is like to be a poor black person who's being regularly harassed by the police, or, all those other things. So I was thinking about that as well. Again, in the future, I don't think we're going to have these breakdowns in dialogue. We're not going to have politicians who grew up in Eton so detached from the real world that it's not that they hate the other world, it's that they don't even have the ability to empathize with those people, because what they think is empathy with those people is actually just their own understanding of the world, which is fine, because you can't have more than your own understanding of the world.
No, there's a complete disconnect, obviously, between classes. Like, classes have always, maybe not always, well, yeah, they've probably always been some sort of instigator of issues. Like the class divide, obviously.
My God, yeah.
So, and to be fair, how many politicians, how many for us prime ministers and presidents and stuff, how many of them actually grew up like working class in like a really poor, shitty area, or have that experience coming from that place and then have become like a prime minister or leader of a country? I don't really know, but for the most part, it seems like that's not the case.
No,
It's usually either, obviously Boris Johnson and previous people have just been similar backgrounds, come up kind of carefree, like you say, private schools, all the rest of it. So without that understanding, they're
unable.
Their philosophies and their outlook on things is just going to be completely different.
Yeah.
To the people, like to the working class and to the people who need support in moments like these. Like you say, if he's never experienced racism before in his upbringing, or even just in his life in general, he's not really going to know how to react to it, how to deal with it. So I think a lot of it does come down to education and just having an awareness and an understanding of what is happening. And I guess that's what's good about the protests and good about, like movements and foundations that educate people and educate kids and all the rest of it, because that's obviously a very necessary part of increasing awareness and educating people about what actually goes on.
I feel like one day soon we'll be educating people on different things like, self-growth, self-worth, these sorts of like things that they kind of had them at my school a little bit. We called it, I can't remember what we called it, PE, personal education. But it was quite a liberal school that I went to.
Right.
It wasn't really much, but, we're going to move on to a point where those are big issues, and they're things that are taught in schools, and they're things that we regard as being important, which is like understanding each other and being able to speak to each other, being able to speak to someone you don't have a lot of understanding with. Have you seen the film Arrival?
No.
You should watch that film.
I don't think so.
It's got a really interesting take on the philosophy of language and how the philosophy of language and the written language relates to the philosophy of time.
Right.
I don't want to give you away anything. It's a great film, and it really sort of fleshes out this interesting idea that links the way that we write on a page from left to right with the way that we perceive time, and then that is sort of expanded into a full film and
Right.
taken to its full conclusion in a fantastic way, except for the last 5 minutes suck.
Is it? It's not the one with Brad Pitt, is it?
No.
I don't know what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of that one where they go to space.
It's got that guy in it who Chris D'Elia is always making fun of for making the music. Well, not making fun of, but just finds it hilarious that he...
Jeremy Renner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeremy Renner's in it. I think it's Jeremy Renner.
Right.
And let's have a look. Yeah, Jeremy Renner, Amy Adams, Forrest Whitaker. Yeah, it's fantastic. Maybe we can watch it soon because it is really interesting, and maybe it is important for now actually, because a lot of the themes that come into it is actually like what I'm saying about these issues not being an issue in the future and stuff like that.
I think I lied. I have seen this.
Well, maybe we should watch it again.
Yeah. Now that I've seen the cover, I have seen it. I think that's why I associated it with going to space, because it's kind of the opposite.
It's a little bit of a space movie, kind of. Aliens come to Earth.
That's it.
And they have to deal with it. However, it's not really a space movie, to be honest. It's, in my eyes, it's it's like a philosophical movie.
Yeah.
I mean, what is...
They have to like
All these
decipher
mo-
their
yeah.
language, don't they? And
Yeah,
figure out what they
exactly
want,
that,
essentially.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember that now. That is a great movie.
Yeah.
I think I've seen so many movies that I haven't paid enough attention to that I just forget that I've seen them.
Well, this one, I think, if you weren't to take in all of that at the same time, it can come across as like quite a boring alien movie, or not boring, but it can come across as quite a sort of like not very exciting alien movie, when really it's like a deep philosophical alien movie about where we are in life.
I definitely didn't consider the philosophies behind it. I thought it was just they were just trying to do another take on an alien movie. But now that you've said it, I know exactly what you mean in terms of like them trying to like break down the boundaries of communication.
Exactly. Well, let's watch it, and then let's talk about it next time,
come back to
and
it.
we can flesh out these points a bit more, because I think that we can wrap that up for today.
Yep. Okay.
Cheers, man.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Like and subscribe.